Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about my thoughts on the Mercedes Monet belt collecting, because she has 12 now. She just won another. Like, why I think this is like absolutely pointless and even to the point of a little stupid. So, first, let me start off by saying the following. First of all, I am no longer a wrestling fan. I occasionally pop in on YouTube to see what's going on, check out a couple of the female matches. That's about it. Like, I'm just not invested into wrestling like I used to be back in the day. Second, let me also say that I do not hate Mercedes Monet, aka Sasha Banks. I actually think she's a really good wrestler and everything. So I'm not one of those people who's on like, the Mercedes hate train and, just to get clicks and likes and stuff like that. Like, I actually think she's really good at what she does. Yeah, her like mic skills could get a little bit more better, but other than that, I think she's a really good wrestler. However, this whole belt collecting thing, in my opinion, is really, really stupid and a little dumb. Like, I don't see the point of this because there has to be an epic conclusion. If not, it's just gonna be okay. They're just tossing wrestling belts for you because you felt jilted, being in the WWE or jaded or whatever. Because you gotta remember this. This is not boxing. This is not MMA. This isn't even a karate tournament. Like, this is professional wrestling. It is scripted. You know the outcome of the match unless something goes wrong in the match and then it's a different outcome. But for the most part, you know the outcome. Plain and simple as that. So it's not like you're really winning a belt. You know what I'm saying? That's why I always hate after a pay-per-view. I'm not calling that PLE. I'm used to saying pay-per-view. After a pay-per-view match, they'll have like this press conference and everything, asking the wrestlers, "Oh, what did you have to do to train for this match?" Or, where was your mindset at, and blah, blah. And it's like, it's scripted. Why are they doing this? But back to the topic at hand. So because this is scripted and she's winning all these belts, if there was a real true reason for this, I would be all in. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not in, and I could care less. And I think it's kind of stupid, like I said before. But here are the reasons why I think it's stupid. Well, actually, first, let me explain how all this came to be. So, as we all know, back in WWE, she was Sasha Banks. And so they made her a tag champion with Naomi. And she felt unappreciated and felt like the WWE could care less about the women's tag belts, which they don't care about. And so they decided right before their match, right before the show started, they was going to walk out the company. And they did. She went to like Japan and Naomi went to TNA. Naomi became the women's champion over there. And then after she dropped the title, she went back to WWE, where she got into a feud with, well, first she became tag champion after that whole Jade Cargill thing with Bianca. Then she started the feud with Bianca. Then she became women's champ, and then she got pregnant and vacated her title. But Mercedes has been going all around collecting belts. And we all know how wrestling is. You have this big name champion or this big name wrestler from like WWE or maybe another company. They go to another big company and almost certainly they become like a champion of some sort, whether it's a mid-card title, a tag title, or the world title and stuff. That's just how it is. It's how the company makes you happy and keep you and everything. And so when she went to Japan and she won that belt, I'm like, oh, wow, that's great and everything. But she didn't stay over there for some reason. I'm all like, maybe the Japanese, like, that form of wrestling was too much for her. So she went back to America and later joined AEW. So I knew what was going to happen. At some point, she was going to become world champion, but never did. Then all of a sudden, she started belt collecting. And then she finally won a title in the actual AEW, but she won the mid-card title. Sorry about that. And so at one point she had like 9 but lost one to a Japanese wrestler. And then she reclaimed another belt. Then she had 10. Then she had 11 by last week. And now she has 12 as of today. And the first thing I started thinking about, and the reason why this feels stupid and pointless to me, is I've never heard of any of these belts or any of these indie promotions or any of the people she won these belts from. So it feels pointless because look, you gotta look at the wrestling fan. There are about 3 types of wrestling fan. You have your hardcore wrestling fan, the people who literally know wrestling in and out, know the definition of everything, can dissect it, can tell you a big name wrestler from like the 60s or the 70s, or like one of the biggest matches from the 60s or the 70s. They can tell you every champion who ever won a belt since the 60s and the 60s and the 70s. That's your hardcore people. You know, like your stands, if you will. Then you have your actual wrestling fans who only watch. Oh, also those hardcore people are mostly people who like know a lot about like the indie circuit and stuff. Then you have your wrestling fans who are most of the time just people who turn on the TV to a big promotion and a big promotion only, like AEW, WWE, TNA, and they just don't pay attention to the indie stuff. Then you have your casual wrestling fans who are like people who really don't know much about wrestling, could really care less about it. They might like this wrestler, so they'll watch and tune in for that. Something like that, you know? And so I used to be a wrestling fan back in the day. I stopped because of many reasons, but I never got into the indie stuff. Not because I hate it. I have a lot of respect for the people on the indie circuit. You know what I'm saying? Especially when there's a big name wrestler from the WWE who gets released. They go around the indie circuit. And what I like to do sometimes is check their Wikipedia page and see how they either never won a title in WWE or they won like one mid-card title. And then when they do this indie stuff, they become like world champion and stuff like that. So that's nice for them. But because it's not on television and the big name stuff, I'm not going to check it out and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? I keep to what I know. And what I don't know is none of these indie promotions. I don't know any of these indie wrestlers' names. I don't even know what their championship belts look like. Now, back in the day, when I would be buzzing around television, and all of a sudden a weird channel will pop up that catches my interest. I'm like, oh, wrestling's there. But it's like an indie thing, so I don't really recognize nobody until it's a big name person who used to be called by somebody else back in the day, back when they was younger. And so I'll check that out. Their wrestling belts depends. Sometimes they look real. Other times they look super fake and flat. And other times they're just WWE knockoffs and they just put a different name on it and stuff. And so, like, because most wrestling fans are wrestling fans, not the hardcores and not the casual people, they don't really know a lot of these smaller indie circuit promotion places. They also don't know a lot of the wrestlers there or what the belts even look like. So you have Mercedes Moné, or is it Mercedes Money? Whatever. Coming in to AEW and everything, bringing in all these new belts. And I'm just kind of like, okay, where this come from and stuff. So it's kind of like, I don't care, you know? Now, if it was one thing, like say she was in AEW, they had more women's belts and she started winning all those belts, that would mean something to me. It's similar to what Kurt Angle did in TNA. The man literally won every single type of belt there was. He had the tag belts. He had the world belt. I don't think he had the X division belt. He might have had the mid-card one. and everything. But that was impressive. He had every major belt in that company. He was the man, you know. They've done a couple of stuff like that in WWE with certain people and stuff. Like you'll have like a fraction, like when Stone Cold and Triple H teamed up, and they had the tag belts and the world and mid card belt. You know what I'm saying? They was unbeatable. And so over here in AEW, she only has one AEW belt and a bunch of other belts that come from other places. And it's just kind of like, I don't understand how she's that person. You know what I'm saying? I don't even understand why they call her the CEO. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like, what's the end game with this? When she wrestles one person, are they gonna wrestle just for one belt or all the belts? You know what I'm saying? And then what's gonna happen when she has to drop these belts? How exactly is she gonna do it? Is she gonna drop them one by one week after another, or 1 month after another, or something like that? That's gonna kind of look lame, because then it's kind of like, okay, now you're just dropping all of them till you keep the one you really want to keep. You know? And not only that, but it's kind of like, what has she done? Really? Oh, not only that, let me finish this. So when all these belts come from these other promotions and everything, and these indie places, now they're out of a belt. Like, what are the women gonna fight for? Just to wrestle, just to wrestle? It's kind of like you took their prized possession away. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have nothing now. Until she's done doing whatever it is she's doing. And now, what exactly has she done since being in AEW? Not only that, but she can't even win the Ring of Honor world title. And that's something she should get, because they're partnered with AEW. She hasn't won the AEW Women's Championship belt yet, and that's the one she should really go for, which she's going for the second time. But what has she really done since being in AEW? Not a whole lot. Like, I don't watch AEW on television. I will pop in on YouTube to see what they're doing, and they always promote their big stars and what they're doing. And sometimes she's never really there for months in. Like, think about it. I first started paying attention to her when she got into that feud with Harley Cameron. And in fact, that's actually what got me knowing who Harley Cameron even is, because I didn't know who she was before. And so that made me a fan of Harley and the whole puppet thing. But they feuded for the belt, which Mercedes got to retain. Then they did a partnership with a tag partnership, and then that was it. Those two hadn't literally talked or been on screen together until now. Like a few weeks ago, there was another backstage segment, and the puppet came back for like a split second, and that pissed Mercedes off, and she just like made what's the name stop talking and everything. And it's kind of like she couldn't even finish that feud with Harley and everything. Then after that, she got into a feud with Toni Storm. I'm like, okay, now it's finally going to happen. She's going to win that belt because Toni had it for a long time. But Toni did not drop. Then they kept having all these weird promo segments and everything where Mercedes would come out and start having a steak dinner as Toni would wrestle. It was odd. It was interesting. It was different. It was unique. But what did it lead to? Nothing. Because once she did not win that title, she just kind of disappeared and everything for a while. And didn't even finish that feud. Then she went over to Ring of Honor. And I think she started feuding with Athena, I think. But then her and Athena like tagged together. And it's kind of like, okay, that should have been a belt you should have went for. Which, by the way, I like Athena, but she's had that belt for way too long. Then, like, she kind of disappeared again, only to come back and challenge Mina for her belt and won that. And it's just kind of like, well, where the heck she's been before then? Oh, she's been in the indie circuit, taking their belts and everything. Her and Mina, I don't even think they had a feud, I don't believe. Like, I don't remember those two ever having a segment together. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And then not only that, but then now she's gonna challenge again for the women's AEW title with Statlander. And I'm starting to think, oh my God, really? Is Statlander a transitional champion? All because Tony probably didn't want to drop it to Mercedes, and so they're gonna have what's her name drop it, and I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. And here's the thing about Statlander. Don't really know much about her. I haven't really watched her wrestle that much. I saw her wrestle Tony just recently on YouTube, and that was the slowest paced match I ever seen. It was like they were scared to wrestle or something. However, Statlander's mic skills are atrocious. My God, they are horrible. So it made me think, why is the belt on her? And her mic skills are not horrible. Her promos are just as worse. Her and Tony literally laid in the ring, not looking at each other, just talking. Different, unique. But what was really the point? So that makes me think she's not really there to be like the world champion for long. And Mercedes is probably going to get that belt. And then once they bring in the tag belt, you know she's going to like be a tag champion at some point. And so to me, this whole belt collecting thing just feels really repetitive. She comes out with her dancing boys and that's about it. Is she even going to get to keep a replica so she can put on her wall? Who knows? But the biggest question is, when she's taking these belts from these people, does it really matter if the majority of the fan base has no idea who any of these people are? You become very uninvested in everything. And not only that, but when she starts dropping these titles, it's gotta be in a big, huge way. Like, 'cause once she starts losing titles, she's gonna look like a person who can't win. You know? She's gonna start looking like a loser and everything. And then what if she loses all those belts and then she finally becomes AEW Women's Champ? Then it's kind of like, well, how did you lose all those other belts, but then you beat what's the name for this? Like, do you see, it's gonna make somebody not look special? So this whole belt collecting thing is really starting to backfire on her, because either she's gonna look like an irrelevant like champion who's gonna lose all her belts, or like whoever loses that women's AEW title is gonna look irrelevant and everything, and it's gonna make them look weak. Then what's gonna happen if they don't win that championship belt again for like a very long time? Like, you see what I'm saying? So this whole belt collecting thing could have been very interesting if she would have took her behind on over to TNA, because then she could have been the women's champion, tag champion, and whatever that mid-card title is that does the whole intergender thing. Then she could start being like, yo, I'm the top woman in the company because I got all the belts and can't nobody touch me. She doesn't have a fraction stable to secure her dominance. She doesn't like be in a feud for as long as like 2 or 3 weeks and everything, and then she's gone again. She's just there to make her happy because she felt like she was disrespected by WWE. But now it's just like people can see through this facade. They're just giving her belts to make her happy, to keep her there. But she's barely there. And so it's just pointless, in my opinion. It's pointless, it's stupid. And then when those champions do beat her, and then when they get beat in their own promotion by somebody who's less than Mercedes, who's not as good as Mercedes, it's gonna make all that belt collecting look pointless again. So that's just my thoughts and everything. I just think this is kind of stupid. I don't hate her by no means, but this is one of the worst gimmicks I've seen in a while. Yeah, she's on top, but on top of what? I don't know any of these promotion companies and stuff, so I could care less. And some of these belts look super cheap. You know what I'm saying? Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.